Okay.
over the top.
I'm going to be reading Mark 6:30, and then she's going to read Mark, I forgot what you're reading, 45 to 56, I think. I can't remember. Yeah. The apostles returned to Jesus and told him all they had done and taught. And he said to them, "Come away by yourself to a desolate place and rest a while." For many were coming and going, and they had no leisure even to eat. And they went away in a boat to a desolate place by themselves. Now many saw them going and recognized them, and they ran there on foot from all the towns and got there ahead of them. When he went ashore, he saw a great crowd, and he had compassion on them, because they were like sheep without a shepherd. And he began to teach them many things. And when it grew late, his disciples came to him and said, "This is a desolate place, and the hour is now late. Send them away to go into the surrounding countryside and villages, buy themselves something to eat." But he answered to them, "You give them something to eat." And he said to them, "Shall we go and buy 200 denarii worth of bread and give it to them to eat?" And he said to them, "How many loaves do you have? Go and see." And when they had found out, they said, 5 and 2 fish. Then he demanded them all to sit down in groups in green grass. So they sat down in groups by hundreds and by 50s. And taking the 5 loaves and the 2 fish, he looked up to heaven and said in a blessing, and broke the loaves and gave them to the disciples to set before the people. And he divided the 2 fish among them all. And they all ate and were satisfied, and they took up 12 baskets full of pieces and of the fish. And those who ate the loaves were 5,000 men.
And timidly he made his disciples get into the boat and go before him to the other side to Bethsaida, while he dismissed the crowd. And after he had taken leave of them, he went up on the mountain to pray. And when evening came, the boat was out on the sea, and he was alone on the land. And he saw that they were making headway painfully, for the wind was against them. And about the 4th watch of the night, he came to them walking on the sea. He meant to pass by them, but when they saw him walking on the sea, they thought it was a ghost and cried out, for they all saw him and were terrified. But immediately he spoke to them and said, "Take heart, it is it. I do not be afraid." And he got into the boat with them, and the wind ceased, and they were utterly astounded, for they did not understand about the loaves, but their hearts were hardened. When they had crossed over, they came to land at Gennesaret and moored to the shore, yeah. And when they got out of the boat, the people immediately recognized him and ran about the whole region and began to bring the sick people on their beds to wherever. They heard he was, and wherever he came in villages, cities, or countrysides, they laid the sick in the marketplace and employed him that they might touch even the fringe of his garment, and as the fringe of his garment. Okay. And as many touched it were made well.
Am I on? There we go. I was laughing because I don't know how many Bible studies I've been through that full-grown men, women won't read out loud because they're not about to try to pronounce that in front of everybody else. But the truth is somebody made it up, and then somebody else heard it and said the same thing. And generally, if you phonetically sound it out, you're just fine. So we are in Mark chapter 6. We're going to start out in verse 7. So if you've got your Bibles with you, I really hope you do. Go ahead and turn there. And man, this is fun to be in a new place. Whole different feel, a little bit different setup. Thank you to the crew that helps make this happen every morning. I could not even remotely hope to get any of this done without you, so appreciate y'all. All right, verse 7. Then Jesus went around teaching from village to village. Calling the 12 to him, he began to send them out 2 by 2 and gave them authority over the impure spirits. Okay, before we get too further down the list here, there's a couple things I want to make notice of. Number one, notice he didn't send them alone. He sent them out 2 by 2s. I asked Emma and Zoe to come up here a couple weeks ago, and Zoe's like, I'll do it if you do it, Emma. And so there's something about being together with somebody else that gives you the confidence to do things that you wouldn't normally do. So when we're out evangelizing, it's best to have a buddy with you. Second thought. As we just said a couple moments ago, Emma and Zoe were read for us. Man, what confidence that gives us, right? What confidence that gives us. So verse 8, these were his instructions. Take nothing for the journey except a staff. No bread, no bag, no money in your belts. Wear sandals, but not an extra shirt. And whenever you enter a house, stay there until you leave that town. You know, this goes a little bit against our intuition, isn't it? Leave with absolutely nothing. But that teaches us reliance on Jesus, his provision. I'm guessing likely the disciples probably maybe hesitated a bit here. But it's essential to learning to trust God. We're going to talk a lot about that as we go forward. Also, I underline bread in my Bible because bread has such a prominent theme in the rest of this chapter. More on that later. Verse 11, and if any place will not welcome you or listen to you, leave that place and shake the dust off your feet as a testimony against them. Essentially what Jesus is saying here is, if the people reject you, it's on them. It's not on you. You don't need to worry about it. It's like, let your peace land on them, and if they don't want your peace, move on to somewhere else. I remember in ministry at the last church that I served at for the last 10 years, it was in big Kansas City, so there was a pretty sizable homeless population there. And every once in a while, we would have people that came in with need. And so we had a system in place to help decide whether or not their need was benevolent. A lot of times people would lie through the skin of their teeth to get just a few extra bucks for the next hit. And so we wanted to be good stewards of our money. So to keep that from happening, we put them through a series of questions that were kind of a little bit designed to make sure that their story stayed consistent. Because if they needed help, we were all about helping them. But if we were helping them to stay in their dysfunction, we didn't want to do that either. And so oftentimes when somebody would come in and they didn't get the answer that they wanted, maybe about 5% of the time, somebody would walk out to that door, they would open it up, they would look back at us, and they would do this and keep on walking out the door. That's a gross misuse of this verse, by the way. It's a gross misuse of it. All right, verse 11. And if any place, verse 12, I'm sorry. They went out and preached that the people should repent. They drove out many demons and anointed many sick people with oil and healed them. See, here's the interesting part. Shake off your feet against them. But here's the thing. If somebody's coming in through the land and they're healing people and they're making everybody better, they're welcome to stay at my house. I'm just saying, right? They can stay with me. I'd be all about that. So I wanted to start in that part of the verses because there's another story that comes out about the beheading of John the Baptist, but we're going to save that for a later time. You can do that in your small groups. We're going to jump down into Mark 6, verses 30 through 32. So jump down a little ways. And so after they've done all this, it says, the apostles returned to Jesus and told him all that they had done and taught. And he said to them, come away by yourselves to a desolate place and rest a while. For many were coming and going, and they had no leisure even to eat. And then it went away in the boat to a desolate place by themselves. Well, how many of you were here last week? How much did we talk about crowds? We jump right in here, come away by yourselves to a desolate place and rest a while. So they were trying to get away from the crowds after they had just been out doing this ministry. And after a demanding mission, Jesus recognized their need for solitude and rest. I think even the strongest of extroverts actually need some downtime to recharge. I don't care how extroverted you are. When you're stuck in a crowd to the point where it's like you can't even enjoy a meal without being bumped into, disrupted, all that kind of stuff, it's time to be alone for a little while. Jesus recognized that they needed rest, so they got in the boat and they went to a desolate place by themselves, so they thought. Jumping into 32. And they went away in the boat to a desolate place by themselves. Now many saw them going and recognized them, and they ran there on foot from all the towns and got there ahead of them. Uh-oh. When he went ashore, he saw a great crowd. Surprise, surprise. And he had compassion on them because they were like sheep without a shepherd. And he began to teach them many things. They were like sheep without a shepherd, which is the title of today's sermon. When I was 13 years old, I learned something about sheep. My brother and I often went to this little pasture that he was friends with a buddy whose dad owned the pasture. And it was typical scenery of a lot of Nebraska. There was cars lined up one after another out in this pasture, all makes and models, and most of them had been robbed many apart. And so every once in a while we'd need something, and if you went in there, you're able to find it. The guy that owned the property would say, $5 for this, $10 for that. And so we went in there all the time to get there. It was overgrown with weeds. It was kind of a mess to get there. You'd open the door, hornets would fly out. Yeah, it was kind of a mess, but I loved it. This one time was different. We go to this property, and there wasn't a weed in the lot. And then what we realized is there was sheep everywhere. It's like the farmer had made a deal with another farmer, said, hey, I'll let my sheep in here, and they'll eat the weeds and get them out of your way. The guy's like, sure, let them in. Didn't think anything of it, walked in the gate, had permission, went and got the part we needed, and they were so annoying. Like, we're trying to get this part off there, and if you weren't watching, they'd be bucking you in the backside, trying to knock you over, rubbing up against you, just being completely obnoxious, neighing at you. It was fine, it was just obnoxious. It wasn't until we went to leave that we realized we had a big problem. Because we went out the gate, and then all 60 of them just bull rushed that gate. Almost trampled us over, and then they went everywhere. And that's when I learned I hate sheep. Because we spent an hour trying to get one back in the pen. We finally caught him, couldn't steer him. We lifted him up and tried to lift him over the fence. He kicked, and then we dropped him on his head. And it's like, this is not going to work. We got to figure something else out here. And so we went to the farmer, let him know what we did. What do we do? Can we pay to have? I mean, we felt so bad about it. Both of us were broke, and we're like, if he charges us, we're hosed. We don't have any money. But he said, no, the neighbor actually has a dog that'll make really quick work of that. And he's like, honestly, it's okay, because right now they're eating all the weeds around my property. Might as well get rid of it. So he was very gracious with that. But I learned that calling people sheep is not a compliment. All right? Jesus, when he says sheep without a shepherd, that was not a compliment. But God's people are called sheep in Scripture because we can be difficult, obstinate, and we are most definitely in need of a shepherd because left to ourselves, we're in a lot of trouble. See, shepherds provide a pretty essential role. Protection. Shepherds defend the sheep from predators. Back in Jesus' time, that would have been even more critical. You guys have all heard the story of King David right now, right? The little shepherd boy who killed Goliath with a slingshot. Now, this wasn't a pitchfork with a rubber band. This was like an actual sling. What I've heard, and I've seen people do it, is like they can actually break the sound barrier with the stone when they throw it because they're lobbing that thing so fast. And so when David is out in this field protecting a sheep, it records that he killed lions and bears with it. Okay, so when he comes up against a giant, he probably has a lot more confidence than you would think. Because a metal helmet, it's blunt force impact. It's going to drive that thing right into his head. So when David's out there, he's like, I can kill a lion, a bear. He's just a dude. Pretty incredible. So the role of a shepherd is to protect. They also provide health care. They monitor the health, treat illnesses, manage parasites. Now we have better technology for that today, but they had some pretty cool tricks in their trade back then too. Let me tell you a quick story about wool management, because that is another critical part of being a shepherd is wool management. Otherwise, why do you have sheep? So there's this domesticated sheep, and they usually undergo annual shearings to keep their coats in check. However, this particular ram, nicknamed Barak, it's actually spelled B-A-A-R-A-C-K. I don't know if that's a pun, like Barak. I'm not sure what they were getting at there, but it was a merino sheep, and it was roaming wild in a state forest in Victoria, Australia. He hadn't been shorn in years, and his fleece had grown into a dense, gargantuan mass. By the time he was captured and brought to the Edgar Mission Farm Sanctuary for rescued farm animals in Lansfield, this is not that long ago, the sheep's wool had eventually blinded him, making him easily catchable. So the sheep went rogue, and he had a big problem on his hands. Barak was finally shorn of his heavy wool burden, which weighed about as much as a 10-year-old child. It was a 78 pounds of overgrown matted fleece, stained with dirt, studded with twigs, and crawling with insects. Can you see the sheep picture up here? Go back to that woolly one. Yeah, that's the problem. It says when he stood up, you could see about this much of a hoof. That sheep, that guy had a big, big problem. So that was the photo of Barak before his haircut, showing the sheep's muzzle poking out of an enormous and very crusted wool cocoon. When the sheep was standing, only his hooves were visible. The load of wool around his head was so heavy that it partially hid his face, made him blind, and the fleece's weight pulled on his lower eyelids. This is interesting. Exposing his eye to grit and dust. He had a painful ulcer in one eye from a stuck grass seed, according to the mission representative. He was about to go blind. The amount of wool removed from Barak would be enough to knit about 61 sweaters, 490 pairs of men's socks. I'm not wearing it. And you can see what he looked like after his haircut. Guys, that sheep would have never survived in Bible ancient times. There was way too many big predators around. That sheep was big. He would have been dinner time very quickly after he got loose. So constantly, sheep need supervision. A shepherd's close contact and constant care are vital for the well-being of a sheep. Have you guys ever heard of a bummer lamb? Bummer lambs are interesting. If you haven't heard about it, bummer lambs are little babies that the mom has rejected. And so no matter what the shepherd does when he tries to put a little baby lamb next to the mom, it rejects it. It'll kick it away. And so what the shepherd has to do is he has to take the lamb and he'll nurse it with a bottle, he'll keep it with him. And sheep are interesting, they're bonding animals. And so he would have to pick it up and talk to it in the evenings. And they call those bummer lambs. And once they're old enough, they return them to the flock. The cool part about it is when the shepherd comes out in the evenings to call a sheep and he goes, sheep, 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 or whatever he uses to call them with, the first ones to respond are what? The bummer lambs. Does that make John 10:27 come alive for you? My sheep hear my voice and I know them and they follow me. I'm a bummer lamb. Are you? I'm definitely a bummer lamb. And shepherds provide guidance. Shepherds lead sheep to pastures and water, keeping them safe and together as a flock. So as we jump into Mark 6, verses 35 through 43, I think you'll find something interesting here. And when it grew late, his disciples came to him and said, "This is a desolate place, and the hour is now late. Send them away to go into the surrounding countryside and villages and buy themselves something to eat." So this crowd is around them, and I would think understandably so right now, the disciples are pretty ready for the crowds to go home. Remember, they haven't even eaten at this point. They're like, "Can we send them off, Jesus, so we can actually have our alone time, please?" And so that's what happens. And he answered them, "You give them something to eat." So Jesus' intentions is for them to stick around. And they said to him, shall we go and buy 200 denarii worth of bread and give it to them to eat? See, I don't think that it was necessarily going to cost them 200 denarii to be able to feed the 5,000. I think 200 denarii is actually what they had in their pocket and available to them. And 200 denarii wasn't going to get it done, feeding that many people. Because 200 denarii, although it was half a year's wages, it's 5,000, and it says men. So they didn't even count the women and children that was probably there. That number was probably a way higher. And so the disciples said, are we going to spend everything we have and not actually get all these people fed? And Jesus said to them, how many loaves do you have? Go and see. And when they had found out, they said 5 and 2 fish. Well, that helps. 5 and 2 fish? They must be like enormous fish. Like Jonah and the whale type fish, right? No, just kidding. Then he commanded them all to sit down in groups on the green grass. So they sat down in groups by hundreds and by 50s. Guys, the 2 fish and the 5 loaves of bread, I mean, we're talking unleavened bread right here. Those loaves would have been about this big. That was barely going to feed the 13 of them, the 12 disciples and Jesus. That was barely going to feed 13, let alone 5,000. So then he commanded them all to sit down in groups on the green grass, and so they sat down in groups by hundreds and 50s. Now, that's a little bit oddly specific, isn't it? Green grass. Why would it record that? There's not a wasted word within Scripture, so when you look at that, why did he say green grass? Well, if you look at Psalm 23, I think something comes alive for us. Probably one of the most well-known psalms in the Bible. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. By the way, this isn't a command not to want. It's a declaration. It's saying, I have everything I need. The Lord is my shepherd, I've got everything I need. He makes me to lie down where? Oh. So you got this person that says, Jesus that says, they're like sheep without a shepherd. And then we jump into 23 and we have, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. I get everything I need. And he maketh me to lie down where? In green pastures. He leadeth me beside still waters. He restoreth my soul, and he leadeth me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil. That's important, for thou art with me. Why? Because I don't need to worry. I may be a sheep, but he's the shepherd. He's got me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. So we're already back to the theme of a shepherd. The point of this psalm is that the Lord provides what we need, and we have no need to be afraid, for he is with us. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil. That theme will come up again in a huge way shortly. But first, continuing on the text, let's jump into Mark 6, verse 41. And taking the 5 loaves and the 2 fish, he looked up to heaven and said a blessing and broke the loaves and gave them to the disciples to set before the people. And he divided the 2 fish among them all. And they ate and were what? Were all satisfied. I shall not what? Right. And they took up the 12 baskets full of broken pieces and of the fish. Wow. 12. Remember, they only had 5 loaves and 2 fish to begin with. And remember, I shall not want means I have everything I need. In this case, way more. Way more. Immeasurably more. And those who ate the loaves were 5,000 men. Just men. I've heard scholars say that number could have been as high as 10,000 or more. Pretty impressive. So this isn't actually the first time we see this miracle, at least not in the details, but in the practice. We actually see this in 2 Kings, verses 42 through 44. A man came from Baal Shalisha. See, that's how you do it phonetically. Shalisha. Bringing the man of God 20 loaves of barley bread, baked from the first ripe grain, along with some heads of new grain. Give it to the people to eat, Elisha said. So this is Elisha the prophet. Property, I don't know where that came, prophet. How can I set this before 100 men, his servants asked. But Elisha answered, give it to the people to eat. For this is what the Lord says, they will eat and have some left over. Then he set it before them, and they ate and had some left over, according to the word of the Lord. Interesting, isn't it? This whole story of feeding the 5,000 is a direct parallel of a couple of different Old Testament things that likely turn into prophecy in my mind. Church, do you want a shepherd?
Yes.
Absolutely. Good answer. Someone who provides what you need and protects you from evil, sometimes evil you can't even see for our War is not against flesh and blood. It's against the principalities and the rulers of this nature. I want that kind of protection. And sometimes protects you from your own stupidity, because we're sheep. Sometimes we don't need the devil's help to get in trouble. I know I don't. The truth is we are all like sheep. And we operate out of self-interest and will eat the land barren. That's the thing about that pasture. There wasn't a lick of green in it when those sheep were done. And that's why a shepherd, whether the sheep wants to or not, has to move them into greener pastures because they will eat it dry. And then when they come back, it won't be there anymore. It doesn't recover. So the shepherd has to keep these sheep on the move. And that's why the sheep bucked that gate. They wanted food. They had none. They were going to get out of that gate to get food. They're operating out of their self-interest. We will be taken captive and devoured by the enemy, left to ourselves. You want a savior, but do you want a shepherd? There's a difference. Do you want a Lord? You should. It's in your best interest to have a Lord right here, right now. It really is. We don't think of kings in a positive light in our country today. But when you have the ultimate king that has your best interest at heart, make him the Lord of your life. Make him the shepherd of your life. So there's another interesting thing that's going along here, not just talking about shepherd and sheep, but actually there's a lot around bread. So we're going to transition to talking about bread. If you remember at the beginning of this message, I mentioned about the bread having a prominent theme throughout this chapter. I think you're already starting to see this. I also tried to find a good joke about bread to lighten the moment, but they were all so crummy, I couldn't bring myself to, I'm sorry. Dad joke. Actually, if you think that one was bad, the ones I found are way worse. They were so bad. Let me give you a few. Inshallah, if you need anything. I don't want none of that. I'm on a roll. Stop loafing around. You're looking like a stub muffin, and I'm so sorry. Please come back next week. Terrible. Oh, man. There wasn't one that wasn't a dad joke. I never knew there was so much pun in all of that. It's so funny. So in Mark 6, verse 43, it says, "And the disciples picked up the 12 basketfuls of broken pieces of bread and fish." Now, the number 12 is symbolic in a huge way. But that's a lot of leftover. Not only did they have enough now for all 12 of them to eat, they had immeasurably more than what they could eat. See, the problem was they only had 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish. None of them were going to have a full belly on that. Now none of them are going to be able to have what they have left over. It's crazy. But the 12 pieces of bread actually has a little bit of an allegory with what is called the showbread. I don't know if you've ever heard of the showbread. It's an Old Testament kind of concept. And the showbread, or bread of presence, was a set of 12 unleavened loaves of bread placed in 2 stacks on a golden table in the Israelite tabernacle and later the temple. They were representing of God's perpetual provision. So it was by no mistake that they had bread with them. For the 12 tribes of Israel, more than enough for every single tribe of Israel. Each Sabbath, these loaves were replaced, with the old being eaten by the priests in a holy place. The term also refers to the symbolic concept of continuous provision from God and has been seen as a foreshadowing of Jesus. That's interesting too. Foreshadowing of Jesus? I think in every way it was a foreshadowing of Jesus. We're just seeing it here in this text. The showbread was pierced to prevent it from rising while it was baked. Now, it didn't have leaven in it, so it wasn't going to raise much to begin with, but they actually pierced it to make sure it wouldn't. The loaves were unleavened, symbolizing purity. So they were pricked with a tool before cooking. This was one of the special preparations required for this sacred bread. It was very sacred. You didn't touch that. That was a big no-no. So there were symbolic meanings behind the showbread continuing on. Purity and holiness. The absence of leaven represents the absence of sin and corruption. God commanded the removal of all leaven from the Israelites' homes to symbolize the need to cleanse their hearts and live free from sin. Sin as a spreading influence. Leaven serves as a metaphor for sin and false teachings because just a small amount of yeast can affect the entire batch of dough. I like to think of the idea of little white lies. Little white lies grow into big white lies. And then you got a full-blown big lies, and now you're in real trouble. That's what happens. And new beginnings in truth. The feast of the unleavened bread signifies a fresh start. What a beautiful imagery. Free from the corruption of the past. In the New Testament, Paul encourages believers to celebrate the feast with sincerity and truth, not with the old yeast of malice and wickedness. And it's not just in the Bible that we see bread having an allegory in important ways throughout culture. In Italy, as in some other cultures, the slang term bread was equated with money due to bread's historical role as fundamental and essential necessity for daily life. It was money. It was currency. Quite literally, you could buy things with bread. All of this scene of the feeding of the 5,000 is pointing to Jesus being the ultimate shepherd, our provider, and our protector. All of it. So when we jump into the next portion of this, when Jesus dismisses the crowd and we get into the theme of where Jesus walks on water, you'll see how this all ties together. So let's jump into verse 45. Immediately he made his disciples get into the boat and go before him to the other side to Bethsaida. You know, at what point do you stop getting in the boat? Because it always ends up problematically. But he got him in the boat and go before him to the other side to Bethsaida. Well, he dismissed the crowd, and after he had taken leave of them, he went up on the mountain to pray. So Jesus needed his own alone time as well. Verse 47. And when the evening came, the boat was out on the sea, and he was alone on the land. And he saw that they were making headway painfully, for the wind was against them. And about the fourth watch of the night, which would have been around 3 to 6 a.m., he came to them walking on the sea. Now, if you grew up going to church, Sunday school in the area I did, you're probably familiar with this kind of a coloring page. Now, does that look like the environment that I just described in the Bible narrative? It almost looks like he's walking on a beach. Disciples are like, hey, Jesus, what's up? It's like, I don't see anybody straining against the oars. I don't see waves up. I don't see wind going on right here. That's kind of lacking in here. So kids, if you're drawing this, make it rough, because that's more accurate. Awesome. The disciples definitely don't look afraid. But seeing Jesus walk on the water would have been wild, but to see Jesus walking on the waves, that'd have been something to see. And in verse 49, it says he meant to pass by them. Why sit in a boat when you can walk, right? Just keep going. But when they saw him walking on the sea, they thought it was a ghost and cried out. But immediately he spoke to them and said, take heart, it is I. Do not be afraid. Think back to Psalm 23. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will what? Fear no evil. And he got into the boat with them, and the wind ceased. And they were utterly astounded. They did not understand about the loaves, but their hearts were hardened. I'm going to go back to that idea. We'll read 52 in just a second. I didn't put this in the sermon, but I have to say it because this is actually Mark writing this gospel account. Mark was a disciple of Peter, and so when we read Mark, we're actually reading Peter's firsthand witness account of the gospel. Notice it doesn't talk about him walking on the water, how he omitted that part where Peter himself got out on the waves. I don't know if he didn't want to draw attention to himself or he just didn't want to make a fool of himself in front of like the rest of Christendom for the rest of his life, but whatever reason, it's interesting he decided to leave that out. Verse 52, they did not understand about the loaves, but their hearts were hardened. After study of this came alive for me. They didn't understand that the shepherd was going to take care of them, even when he wasn't in their presence right then and there. Jesus takes care of us in all of our circumstances. They didn't remember what had just happened with the 5,000. And so when it says their hearts were hardened, a good definition for that is they were suffering from, as Michael Pazorski likes to put it, spiritual amnesia. Hardened hearts, spiritual amnesia. Forgetting to look forward, forgetting to look back, so you have the confidence to keep going forward. See, we are at our worst when we forget what God has done for us. At our absolute worst when we have forgotten what God has already done for us. Spiritual amnesia is a plague to the believer's heart. And I don't use those words arbitrarily, intentionally. It's a plague to our hearts. Remembrance is one of the most emphasized themes in the Bible, Old Testament and New. Why? Because if we don't look back, our hearts are almost immediately hardened to the difficulties that are in front of us. I'm planning a church right now. I've been warned by many, many different people that have planned church before. It's like, you better keep a journal of everything that God has done because you're going to need that for some of the stuff you're going to face in the future. Because planning a church is really hard. It's ebbs and flows, and it's ups and downs, and it's everything in between. It's like a roller coaster you don't get off of. Like there's no just flat track. It's up, then it's down. It's up, then it's down. And if you want to have the confidence to keep on moving forward, look back to what God has already done. I'm happy to stand before you right now saying I have all the confidence in the world about what's going to go. I look at the group of people I've surrounded with us, and I was like, we're going to be just fine. I'm excited about what the future of this church holds. God has done amazing things in my life, but even at times I still confess that I do let fear get the better of me. And that's where grace comes in. And that's where grace came in for the disciples. I think there was a little frustration from Jesus that he didn't get it, that they had just had something like this miraculous thing where he provided them for in a huge way, and they had just took that long to forget what he had done. But God's grace can never be understated. Christ took hold of me. That's the past to remember. Pressing on to take hold of that purpose to the good news of Jesus, the shepherd who restores, protects, and saves. That's our future. So if you want that future, remember that past. Remember, remember, remember. Which brings us to this time of remembrance, communion. I want to share with you a quick story before we move into this time communion. Amanda's going to come up and we're going to sing a part of a song. She's going to dismiss you for communion. You're welcome to come forward to the tables. We have gluten-free over on this side. And take it back to your chairs. We're not going to direct you on when to take it. That's up to you. This is a time for you to be with the Lord and reflect and remember. And when you're ready, you can take the bread, you can take the juice. And then at the end of the service, there's a receptacle at the end that you can place the little cup in. But before we get there, there's a story I want to share with you. During the harsh winter of Battle of the Bulge in 1944, a young American soldier named Thomas found himself with only half of a loaf of bread. He saw a starving German boy, no older than 10, shivering by the roadside. Despite the risk to his own survival in the brutal wartime conditions, Thomas broke his bread in half and gave one portion to the boy. The boy, now an old man, recounted how that act of kindness saved his life and gave him hope when all seemed lost. Christ's provision. I shall not want. I have everything I need. He needed some kindness more than he did that bread. Somebody to show him humanity, worth, value, sacrifice. And that's what this soldier offered that young boy. And that's what Jesus offers us. When we break the bread, it's Christ's provision. I shall not want, and I have more than enough. And in his provision, he offers us the blood, the precious blood of the Lamb that washes us clean. We look back on what Christ has done so we can press on to take hold of that for which Christ took hold of us. Would you pray with me? Father, as we enter this time of communion, we choose to look back on the things that you've already provided for us, having full confidence that what you have for us in the future, you've got us, God. It says in your word that, the sparrow has no need to worry about anything. You clothe him, you feed him, give him a place to rest. Yet we are so much more valuable than a sparrow. Teach us to trust you the way a dumb bird trusts you. God, that we would have that kind of humility that says, you know what, in the face of the raging sea in front of me, I have still confidence to step out on the water and trust. Because God, it's all about your kingdom's cause. It's all about us moving forward. It's about this church doing its small part in transforming the city of Rapid by sharing your good news of what you've done for us. And that's the testimony, God, that we love you, that we trust you because of the things you've done for us. And that's what compels us to let other people know who you are, because they need you. And if they don't have you, they're like sheep without a shepherd. Break our hearts for what breaks yours. It's in your name I pray. Amen. Would you stand and sing?